The hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the faint beep of cash registers created the backdrop for another uneventful Thursday. My days had settled into a rhythm that, while comfortable, felt empty. Mornings with coffee and a crossword, afternoons volunteering at the library, evenings with a book or reruns of old TV dramas. It all blended into a muted gray. Widowed at 52, I hadn't anticipated how starkly quiet life would become. My daughter lived states away, busy with her career and young family. Friends reached out now and then, but I'd grown skilled at deflecting invitations. I preferred the safety of my routine. That day, the grocery store was busier than usual. As I moved through the produce section, I reached for a bag of oranges just as someone else's hand brushed mine. "Oh, sorry," I said, stepping back instinctively. "No, it's my fault," came a warm, cheerful voice. I looked up and saw him. A man in his early 30s, with dark, wavy hair and a smile that could disarm anyone. His green eyes crinkled as he grinned, holding up a bag of oranges. "I think there's enough for both of us." I chuckled, feeling a bit flustered. "Looks like you're right." We exchanged polite words, and then he was gone, blending into the crowd of shoppers. I caught myself watching him walk away, a flicker of curiosity breaking through the monotony of my thoughts. Later, as I stood in line at the bakery, there he was again, cradling a loaf of sourdough. He caught my eye and smiled. "We meet again," he said, a playful lilt in his tone. "Small town," I replied, matching his smile. That was it, just a passing exchange between two strangers. Yet, as I loaded my car with groceries, I couldn't shake the thought of his easy demeanor, his kindness. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at me with such genuine warmth, let alone someone so young. I didn't expect to see him again, but life has a funny way of rearranging plans. 2 weeks later, as I browsed the local farmer's market, there he was, inspecting a basket of apples. "Third time's a charm," he said, grinning as if we were old friends. I laughed genuinely this time. "Are you following me? Or do we just have the same excellent taste in food?" From that moment, the world seemed to tilt just slightly. That chance encounter at the farmer's market turned into an unexpected conversation. He introduced himself as Adam, a freelance graphic designer who'd recently moved to town for a slower pace of life. I told him my name, Caroline, and confessed I'd lived here for decades, long enough to know everyone in their business. "Well then," he said with a grin, "I guess you'll be my unofficial town guide." It was the kind of line that might have sounded like a joke, but there was sincerity in his voice. I found myself smiling more easily than I had in years. We chatted as we wandered through the stalls, our conversation flowing effortlessly. He asked about the best local spots for hiking, the quiet cafes where he could work, and the festivals he should look out for. I, in turn, learned about his passion for photography and his habit of exploring new places in search of inspiration. When we parted ways, I assumed that would be the end of it, a pleasant interaction with a stranger who'd fade into memory. But Adam had a way of reappearing, as if the universe was determined to weave him into my life. It started small, a wave from across the street, a quick chat when we bumped into each other at the library. Each time, I felt the corners of my world expand just a little. I hadn't realized how much I'd retreated into myself until Adam started drawing me out. One afternoon, I found myself at a quiet cafe with a book in hand. Just as I settled into my chair, Adam walked in, carrying his laptop. "Caroline," he exclaimed, as if seeing me was the best part of his day. "Mind if I join you?" I hesitated for only a moment before nodding. He pulled up a chair and ordered a coffee, his presence filling the space with an ease I hadn't felt in years. We spent hours talking that day, about everything and nothing. He asked questions that caught me off guard, like what I dreamed of as a child and the best decision I'd ever made. His curiosity wasn't invasive, it was kind, genuine. And when he listened, it felt as though nothing else in the world mattered. I left the cafe that day feeling lighter, as if Adam's youthful energy had infused my tired soul with a spark of life. Over the next few weeks, our paths crossed more often. Sometimes it was planned, a walk by the river or a visit to the local art exhibit he insisted I'd love. Other times, it felt serendipitous, like when we both showed up at the same bookstore on a rainy Saturday. It was during one of these outings, as we sat on a park bench overlooking the water, that I realized how much joy Adam had brought into my life. His presence was a reminder that even in the quiet, predictable routine I'd built, there was room for the unexpected. For the first time in years, I found myself looking forward to something, or rather someone. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. Adam had texted earlier, inviting me to join him for coffee at a new cafe he'd discovered. The message made me smile. He always managed to make his invitations sound like little adventures. We spent the afternoon talking about everything from his latest design project to a book I'd recommended that he devoured in a single weekend. At some point, he leaned back in his chair, his green eyes locking with mine as he said, "You know, I really enjoy spending time with you, Caroline. You make everything feel lighter." I felt a warmth rise in my chest, a mix of flattery and something I couldn't quite name. "That's kind of you to say," I replied, trying to downplay the sudden quickening of my heart. But as I walked home later, his words lingered. That night, I found myself staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment in my mind. The way he'd looked at me, his tone, the sincerity in his voice, it had all felt different. The realization crept in slowly, like the first rays of dawn. By the next morning, it was undeniable. I had feelings for Adam. At first, I laughed at myself. How could I, a woman in her 50s, even entertain the idea of being romantically drawn to someone so much younger? It felt absurd, impossible. Yet the thought wouldn't leave me. I spent days trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was just the attention. I wasn't used to someone looking at me the way Adam did. Or maybe it was loneliness, a hunger for connection that had been starved for too long. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't just about the way he made me feel seen. It was the way he listened when I spoke, the way he made the simplest moments feel meaningful. It was his laugh, his curiosity, the way he seemed to savor life in a way I'd forgotten how to. The truth hit me one evening as I stood at the sink washing dishes. My reflection in the kitchen window stared back at me, eyes wide with the weight of my admission. I was falling for Adam. Panic set in almost immediately. What would people think if they knew? What would Adam think if he knew? I tried to imagine telling him, but the thought was mortifying. Surely he saw me as nothing more than a friend, a mentor of sorts. Yet, as much as I tried to push the feelings away, they persisted, blooming in quiet moments when I wasn't on guard. Like when he texted me a photo of a sunset with the caption, "Thought of you." Or when he showed up at my door with a bag of fresh peaches, claiming the farmer's market was too good to miss. It wasn't just a fleeting crush. It was something deeper, more profound. And it terrified me. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions I hadn't expected to feel at this stage in life. Excitement and dread tangled together, like two threads knotted too tightly to separate. When Adam texted or called, my heart leaped. When we met for coffee or strolled through the park, I felt a lightness that seemed to defy the years etched into my face. But when I was alone, the doubts came crashing in. What would people think? A woman in her 50s falling for a man barely in his 30s, it would be scandalous, ridiculous even. I could already hear the whispers, the judgmental tones from old friends or acquaintances at the library. More than that, I worried about Adam. What if I misinterpreted his kindness? What if I jeopardized the easy friendship we'd built by letting my feelings show? The idea of losing him, even as a friend, was unbearable. One evening, I stood before the mirror, examining myself in a way I hadn't in years. The fine lines around my eyes, the silver strands streaking my hair, the softness that had replaced the firmness of my youth, they all stared back at me, unyielding reminders of the years that separated us. "What are you doing, Caroline?" I whispered to my reflection. And yet, I couldn't deny the way he made me feel. Vibrant, alive, as if I were rediscovering pieces of myself long buried beneath routine and solitude. Adam's laughter, his energy, his ability to see beauty in the mundane. It was as if he'd opened a door I didn't even know had been locked. Still, the fear lingered. I carried it with me like an unwelcome companion, shadowing every joyful moment we shared. Even when Adam teased me about my penchant for old black and white movies or sent me articles he thought I'd find interesting, I couldn't escape the nagging voice in my head. One afternoon, as we walked along the riverbank, Adam pointed out a heron standing motionless in the reeds. "Look at that," he said, his voice filled with awe. "It's like it's carved out of stone." I followed his gaze, smiling at the wonder in his tone. "You have a way of noticing things most people overlook." He turned to me then, his expression thoughtful. Maybe. Or maybe I've just learned that the little things are what make life beautiful. His words struck a chord, reverberating in the quiet corners of my heart. I realized, in that moment, that the fear I carried wasn't just about what others might think. It was about what I thought. Somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that love, desire, and passion were things that belonged to the young. That at my age, I was no longer entitled to them. But sitting beside Adam, watching the heron take flight, I began to wonder, what if I was wrong? The thought of taking a step forward both thrilled and terrified me. My heart warred with itself. One side urged caution, the other begged for courage. It started with small gestures, little tests of my own resolve. One morning, I texted Adam first, something I rarely did. Found a new cafe that serves the best scones. Let me know if you want to try it sometime. His reply came almost instantly. Absolutely. Name the time and I'm there. The simplicity of his enthusiasm made me smile. Yet, as the day of our outing approached, my nerves began to fray. What if I read too much into his friendliness? What if I misjudged everything? That afternoon, as we sat at a tiny table tucked in the corner of the cafe, Adam talked about his latest project. A photography series capturing the interplay of light and shadow in the town's historic architecture. It's funny, he said, stirring his tea. Since moving here, I feel like I've started seeing the world differently. Slower, maybe. More intentionally. That's a gift, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Most people rush through life without ever stopping to notice. He smiled at me, and for a moment, the noise of the cafe seemed to fade. You've been a big part of that, you know. Spending time with you. It's made me realize how much I've been missing. My breath caught. There was a warmth in his gaze that sent a thrill racing through me, but I quickly pushed it aside. Surely he couldn't mean it the way my heart wanted to believe. That evening, I stood in my kitchen, staring at my phone. For the first time, I considered inviting him over, not just as a casual gesture, but as a step toward something more. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. I typed out the message several times, deleting each draft before I could hit send. Finally, I settled on something simple. If you're free this weekend, come by for dinner. I'd love to cook for you. I hit send before I could overthink it. The reply came just minutes later. I'd love that. What's your favorite dish to make? I stared at his response, a mix of relief and panic washing over me. I'd done it. I'd taken the first step. Now, all that was left was to face whatever came next. That Saturday, as I prepared the meal, I felt a nervous energy buzzing in me. The house smelled of roasted vegetables and herbs, and I'd even opened a bottle of wine to let it breathe. Everything was perfect, yet my hands trembled as I set the table. When the doorbell rang, I paused to steady myself. This wasn't just a dinner, it was a chance to see where this connection might lead. As I opened the door and saw Adam standing there with his easy smile and a bottle of wine in hand, I realized I wasn't just nervous, I was hopeful. When Adam walked through the door, I felt a flutter in my chest, an odd mixture of anticipation and vulnerability. He looked even more handsome than I remembered, his eyes alight with excitement, a far cry from the quiet restraint I often saw in my own reflection. "Smells incredible," he said, stepping into the warmth of the room. His gaze lingered on the table I had set, the soft glow of the candles creating a cozy, intimate atmosphere. I smiled, gesturing toward the table. I hope it tastes as good as it smells. The evening unfolded in a haze of comfort and laughter. We talked about everything: his move to the town, my years living here, our shared love of art and music, the small absurdities of daily life. I realized, with a shock, that I was no longer trying to fill silences with idle chatter. The silences between us felt natural, comfortable, peaceful. As we shared the meal, I couldn't help but notice how easy it was to be with him. Each glance, each casual touch, his hand brushing against mine as he reached for the wine glass, seemed to deepen the connection between us. Later, after dinner, we moved to the living room, where soft music played in the background. Adam sat across from me, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just admiration in his gaze. It was something deeper, something I hadn't expected but now couldn't ignore. "I've really enjoyed tonight," he said, his voice soft. "More than I thought I would." I smiled, a little unsure of how to respond. I'm glad. I haven't done something like this in a long time. Adam's eyes softened. What do you mean? I mean just inviting someone over. Sharing a meal. It feels different now. In a good way. He leaned forward slightly, his tone suddenly serious. It feels the same to me. Being here with you. You've become someone I really enjoy being with, Caroline. The words hung in the air between us, as if we were both testing the waters, both unsure of what was real and what was just a fleeting moment. And then, in that stillness, something shifted. His gaze didn't waver, and I found myself unable to look away. Without thinking, I reached for his hand, the contact electric in its simplicity. His fingers laced through mine, and I felt an undeniable warmth flood my chest. For a moment, time stood still. The years between us, the worries, the doubts, none of them mattered. All that mattered was the quiet, undeniable connection we shared. He squeezed my hand gently, his voice barely above a whisper. Caroline, I don't know what this is, but I think it's something worth exploring. I nodded, the lump in my throat making it difficult to speak. I think so too. There was no rush, no pressure. It was as if we both knew this moment, this fragile, tender moment was enough. It was the beginning of something new, something I couldn't yet define but was willing to embrace. The days that followed were a quiet unraveling, the space between us filled with soft moments and unspoken understanding. What had once seemed impossible, our connection, our shared intimacy, now felt natural, even inevitable. We continued to meet, to spend time together, each encounter weaving us closer, but never rushing. Each moment was a discovery, a new facet of Adam's personality that I hadn't yet seen, a new layer of myself that I hadn't known was there. We went on walks by the river, sat in the park reading books, and spent evenings talking about the past, the present, and all the dreams that still felt within reach. And each time, it became clearer to me that this relationship, this tender, unexpected bond, was not just about the physical attraction, though that certainly lingered. It was something deeper. One evening, Adam and I sat on my porch, the fading light of dusk casting long shadows on the ground. We sipped wine in comfortable silence, the conversation ebbing and flowing like the breeze around us. There's something about this place, he said, his eyes on the horizon. Something about the way time seems to move slower here. It's like I can breathe easier. I watched him, the way the last of the sunlight caught in his hair, the way his lips curved ever so slightly as he spoke. There was so much to him, so much more than I'd first imagined. I know what you mean, I said quietly. It's the kind of place that lets you reflect, lets you find things in yourself you didn't realize were lost. He turned to face me, his gaze softer now, the air between us thick with something unspoken. You've found something, Caroline. I can see it in you. You've found a way to live fully again. I smiled, touched by his words. It was true. In the past few weeks, I had felt more alive, more present, than I had in years. And a part of me, the part that had been dormant for so long, was awakening, slowly but surely. Maybe, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Maybe I've been waiting for the right person to show me how. He didn't reply immediately. Instead, he took my hand in his touch warm and comforting. His eyes searched mine, and I felt that familiar flutter in my chest, the same one I'd felt from the very first moment we'd met. You don't have to wait anymore, he said, his voice steady but full of meaning. I'm here. And in that moment, I realized something profound. This wasn't just a fleeting connection. It wasn't something that could be explained away by age or circumstance. It was love, simple, pure, and undeniable. We leaned into each other, the silence speaking volumes, the world around us fading away. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what might come next. I knew that love, real love, wasn't confined by time or expectations. It was a force that could find its way into your life when you least expected it, at any stage of life. And in Adam's arms, I felt the truth of that, complete and undeniable, that in the weeks that followed, I began to understand something that I had once only heard others speak of in passing. Love is not bound by age, by the years we accumulate or the time that slips through our fingers. It is a force that transcends the limits we impose on ourselves, a force that grows in unexpected places and between the most unlikely of people. Adam and I continued to explore our relationship with quiet confidence, each moment together a revelation. Our connection deepened, but there was no rush, no urgency. We let things unfold at their own pace, savoring the slow dance of companionship and affection. One evening, as we sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket against the chill of the fall air, I realized that the fears that had once held me captive were slowly dissipating. I no longer worried about what others thought, no longer carried the weight of judgment on my shoulders. I had spent so much of my life conforming to expectations, of what love should look like, of what I should want and need. But Adam had shown me a new way of seeing things, a new way of loving. His presence had taught me that love is not about finding perfection. It's about finding someone who makes you feel seen, valued, and cherished no matter how old you are. Looking back, I could see the path that had led me here. The quiet days spent alone, the moments of doubt, the gradual opening of my heart. Adam hadn't come into my life to fix anything. He had come to show me how to live again, to live with purpose, to live with joy. In his eyes, I saw not just affection, but a deep respect for who I was, for the woman I had become. He didn't see me as a number on a birth certificate. He saw me as Caroline, someone full of stories, wisdom, and still so much to give. As the seasons changed, so did we. Our bond, once tentative, had grown into something beautiful, something that defied the passage of time. There were still challenges, of course. Whispers, questions, the occasional raised brow from those who didn't understand. But we faced them together, unshaken, our hands intertwined with a strength that had been built from trust and shared moments. I had learned something vital from this unexpected chapter in my life. Love is not a matter of when or how, but of who. It's not about timing. It's about the heart's ability to recognize when something extraordinary comes into your life, no matter how improbable it may seem. With Adam, I had found a love that was as fresh and powerful as anything I could have imagined when I was younger. And with him, I knew that no matter what the future held, I would always have the courage to follow my heart. Love, at any age, is worth the leap. It's worth the risk. And so, as the sun set over the horizon, casting its golden glow over the world, I held Adam's hand and smiled, knowing that this, our love, was the greatest gift I could ever have hoped for.